In the winter of 1942, on the western bank of the Volga, Stalingrad burned and crumbled under a storm of steel. The German advance into the Soviet Union had reached the city that bore Stalin's name, a vital industrial hub and a gateway to the oil fields of the Caucasus. To Hitler, its capture was symbolic and strategic. To Stalin, its loss was unthinkable. What began as a sweeping offensive across the steppe became a grinding struggle in streets, factories, and shattered apartment blocks. In this maze of ruins, where front lines often ran through the same building, a new kind of warfare took shape: the sniper's war. Hidden in cellars, perched in rafters, buried under rubble, marksmen from both sides turned every window and every pile of bricks into a potential firing point. Among them, one Soviet sniper would become a legend, Vasily Zaitsev, and at the heart of his legend lay the story of a 3-day duel with a German master sniper known as König or Thorvald, a story he himself would later recount in his memoir, Notes of a Sniper. Vasily Zaitsev's journey to Stalingrad began far from the ruined city, in the rugged landscapes of the Urals. Born into a peasant family, he grew up in a world where hunting was both necessity and tradition. From an early age, he learned to track animals across snow and rock, to judge distance by eye, to wait motionless for hours until the right shot appeared. The rifle was a tool of survival, and patience was as important as accuracy. When the German invasion of the Soviet Union began, Zaitsev volunteered for the front. Initially, he served not as a sniper, but as a regular infantryman, one soldier among many in the vast Red Army formations thrown into the path of the Wehrmacht. It was only as the fighting intensified and the need for skilled marksmen became clear that his hunting skills drew attention. A commander noticed his ability with a rifle and reassigned him to sniper duties. His first confirmed kills on the Stalingrad front were not just tactical victories. They marked the start of a reputation that would spread through the ranks. His tally grew, and with each successful engagement, his name became a whispered reassurance among Soviet troops and a warning among their enemies. Later, in Notes of a Sniper, Zaitsev would describe these early days with a mixture of matter-of-fact detail and reflective distance, presenting himself not as a born hero, but as a hunter adapting his craft to the most brutal of settings. Stalingrad itself was the perfect, terrible stage for a sniper war. Weeks of bombardment had reduced much of the city to a skeleton of rubble and twisted metal. Whole neighborhoods were flattened. Others were half standing, their walls blown open to the sky. Cellars became command posts and sniper nests. Factory districts, with their gantries, boilers, and broken machinery, offered countless hiding places and vantage points. The front lines were often so close that opposing soldiers could hear each other's voices, yet the ruins made large-scale maneuvers difficult. The battle settled into a pattern of close-quarters assaults, sudden raids, and static defense. In such conditions, the precision rifleman became a force multiplier. A single sniper could pin down a street, deny access to a key intersection, or make the simple act of crossing a courtyard a deadly gamble. Both Soviet and German forces adapted their tactics to this environment. Assault groups would probe forward under covering fire, while snipers hunted officers, machine gun crews, and anyone who exposed themselves for too long. The psychological impact was immense. The fear of an unseen enemy watching from some broken window or darkened stairwell seeped into every movement. Soldiers hugged walls, crawled through rubble, and avoided silhouetting themselves against the light. Rumors of particularly deadly snipers spread quickly. turning individuals into specters that haunted entire sectors of the front. As Zaitsev's successes accumulated, his role expanded beyond that of a lone hunter. Soviet commanders recognized that the snipers' war in Stalingrad was not a passing phenomenon, but a crucial element of the city's defense. Zaitsev was tasked with training others, effectively building a sniper school amid the ruins. Using his own experience as a guide, he taught recruits how to blend into the shattered landscape, how to use debris, shadows, and even corpses as cover. He emphasized patience, the art of waiting for hours without moving, resisting the urge to fire at the first target in order to strike a more valuable one. He drilled them in the importance of observation, of reading the battlefield through tiny movements, a helmet edge, a glint of glass, a wisp of breath in the cold air. Spotters became essential partners, scanning with binoculars, tracking enemy patterns, and communicating in whispers or subtle signals. Teamwork, not lone wolf bravado, was the key to surviving and succeeding. At the same time, Soviet propaganda seized on Zaitsev's story. His growing kill count was reported in newspapers and broadcasts. He became a symbol of resilience, a hunter of fascists whose calm skill embodied the Soviet will to resist. Photographs and articles presented him as the archetypal frontline hero, inspiring others to follow his example. The line between the man and the myth began to blur even as he continued to fight. On the other side, German commanders could not ignore the mounting losses inflicted by Soviet snipers. Reports of officers struck down while surveying positions, of machine gunners killed the moment they set up, of patrols pinned by unseen marksmen reached higher headquarters. In response, the Germans refined their own sniper doctrine and brought in experienced sharpshooters to counter the Soviet threat. German snipers were well equipped, using rifles fitted with optics suited to long-range precision, and trained in camouflage and fieldcraft. Within this context, the story emerges of a particular German sniper, identified in Soviet accounts as König or Thorvald, sent specifically to hunt down Zaitsev. Some versions describe him as an officer from an elite sniper school, others as a Wehrmacht major or an SS specialist. The details vary, and German archival records have not produced a clear match for the man described. Yet, in Soviet narratives, and later in popular retellings, this figure became the embodiment of the German counter-sniper effort, a master marksman dispatched to eliminate the Soviet ace. Accounts from both sides are fragmentary and often filtered through propaganda, but they converge on the idea of a high-stakes duel in the ruins of Stalingrad. According to Zaitsev's own account, the duel began with intelligence reports. Soviet troops in a particular sector had suffered an unusual pattern of sniper casualties, carefully chosen targets, precise shots, and a sense that a single, highly skilled enemy was at work. Zaitsev and his spotter, often identified in his memoirs, were tasked with finding and neutralizing this threat. They studied the terrain, a devastated area of no man's land between Soviet and German positions, strewn with debris, shell craters, and the skeletal remains of buildings. It was, in effect, a chessboard of rubble. Zaitsev chose it as the killing ground, reasoning that a sniper confident in his abilities would use the same vantage points again and again. Over the next days, the duel unfolded as a tense game of cat and mouse. There were probing shots, single rounds fired to test reactions, to see where dust or brick fragments flew, to coax the opponent into revealing a hint of his position. Both men used feints, placing helmets or other objects as decoys, exploiting reflections and shadows to mislead the other. Zaitsev describes in Notes of a Sniper how he and his spotter lay motionless for hours, shifting only millimeters at a time, watching for the slightest anomaly in the shattered landscape. Hunger gnawed at them, cold stiffened their limbs, and nerves frayed under the constant awareness that a single mistake meant death. Yet neither side could afford impatience. Each waited for the other to err. As the standoff dragged into its second and third day, the psychological strain deepened. The lines between hunter and hunted blurred. Zaitsev later wrote of the mental battle as much as the physical one, controlling fear, forcing himself to think methodically, resisting the urge to rush a shot. Eventually, he believed he detected a clue, a suspicious piece of metal or debris, perhaps a plate or a fragment of armor, placed in a position that offered a narrow field of fire. It seemed too deliberate, too carefully sighted to be random. He suspected that the German sniper was concealed behind it, using it as a shield and firing slit. The challenge was to confirm this without exposing himself. Using his spotter's observations and his own experience, Zaitsev watched the area at different times of day, noting how light struck the metal. At a key moment, he saw a faint glint, a reflection that suggested the presence of an optical sight behind the cover. That was the opening he had waited for. Timing his shot to when he believed the enemy was looking out, he fired at the suspected loophole. In his account, the bullet found its mark. After a tense pause, there was no answering fire. Later, under cover of darkness or during a lull, Soviet troops moved forward to inspect the position. There, according to Zaitsev, they found the body of a German officer, along with sniper equipment that confirmed his status. The duel, at least in his telling, had ended with a single, decisive shot. Inside Notes of a Sniper, this episode is recounted with a blend of vivid detail and narrative shaping. Zaitsev presents the duel as a test of skill and will, highlighting the interplay between observation, patience, and nerve. His tone is generally restrained. He does not dwell on triumphalism, so much as on the professional challenge and the ever-present risk. The German opponent is portrayed with a certain respect, as a worthy adversary whose abilities demanded utmost caution. At the same time, the story fits neatly into a heroic framework. The Soviet sniper defending his city, outwitting and defeating the enemy's best. The memoir, written after the war, inevitably reflects both memory and the expectations of its time. Elements of fear, duty, and survival run through Zaitsev's narrative. He acknowledges moments of tension and doubt, but he also reinforces the ideal of the steadfast Soviet soldier. As part of the broader body of Soviet wartime literature, Notes of a Sniper served not only as a personal recollection, but also as a contribution to the collective memory of the Great Patriotic War, reinforcing themes of sacrifice, endurance, and ultimate victory. The question of how much of the duel is literal fact and how much is embellished or shaped by propaganda has occupied historians for decades. Researchers have combed German records for an officer named König or Thorvald, matching the description in Soviet accounts, with limited success. Some have suggested alternative spellings or ranks. Others have proposed that the German sniper might have been a composite figure representing several adversaries rolled into one narrative. There is also the possibility that Soviet propagandists amplified a real but less dramatic encounter into a symbolic showdown between two masters. Different versions of the story disagree on details. The opponent's exact name and unit, the precise location, the length of the duel, even the number of shots fired. Yet the absence of definitive archival confirmation has not dispelled the tale. Part of the reason lies in the needs of wartime storytelling. In the midst of the brutal struggle at Stalingrad, a clear, personalized narrative, a duel between a Soviet hero and a German super sniper,
was a powerful tool for morale. It offered a human-scale drama within the chaos of an industrial war. Over time, as the story was retold in books, articles, and films, it solidified into legend. The enduring appeal of the duel rests less on documentary certainty than on what it symbolizes. The clash of wills in a city reduced to ruins, the idea that individual skill and courage still mattered amid mass destruction. Beyond Zaitsev himself, the sniper war in Stalingrad involved many others whose names are less widely known, but whose roles were significant. Other Soviet snipers, men and women alike, built their own tallies and reputations. Some specialized in night operations, others in defending specific sectors such as factory complexes or river crossings. Many trained under Zaitsev's guidance or under instructors influenced by his methods. On the German side, counter-sniper units adapted quickly, learning to spot likely sniper hides, to use smoke and suppressive fire to neutralize suspected positions, and to deploy their own sharpshooters in overlapping fields of fire. For the snipers themselves, daily life was a mixture of intense focus and grinding hardship. They endured cold that froze fingers to metal, hunger that made hands tremble, and constant vigilance that left little room for rest. They often operated close to civilians still trapped in the city, families sheltering in basements, workers caught between the lines. The presence of non-combatants raised ethical dilemmas. Shots had to be taken with care to avoid hitting innocents, yet the chaos of urban combat made such precision difficult. Over time, the cumulative effect of sniper activity wore down German morale. The knowledge that a single step into the open might draw a fatal shot made movement cautious and slow, complicating logistics and command. Even when the material damage was limited, the psychological weight of the invisible marksman was heavy. After Stalingrad, Zaitsev's own story continued through pain and recovery. He was wounded before the end of the battle, suffering injuries that required lengthy treatment. For a time, it was uncertain whether he would return to frontline duty. But he did eventually resume service, though the war's later phases took place in different landscapes and under different conditions than the hell of Stalingrad. In recognition of his actions, he received high honors, including the title Hero of the Soviet Union, one of the state's most prestigious awards. In the post-war years, he lived a comparatively quiet life, working in civilian roles while remaining a figure of respect in veteran circles. The publication of Notes of a Sniper brought his wartime experiences to a broader audience. Readers encountered not just the famous duel, but also the day-to-day realities of a sniper's existence. The long waits, the fleeting shots, the comrades lost.
The memoir was well received in the Soviet Union, fitting into a larger tapestry of war literature that celebrated heroism, while also, at times, hinting at the cost. Monuments, commemorations, and articles reinforced his place in Soviet memory. For many, he became the face of the Stalingrad sniper, the man whose rifle and eye helped hold the line on the Volga. The duel's cultural afterlife extended far beyond the Soviet Union. In films, novels, and popular histories, the confrontation between Zaitsev and the German master sniper became a set piece, a ready-made drama. Different storytellers interpreted it in different ways. Some works emphasized the tactical cat-and-mouse, focusing on the technical aspects of sniping. Others explored the psychological dimensions, portraying the two men as mirror images locked in a struggle that transcended nationality. The Western film Enemy at the Gates offered one of the most widely known portrayals, dramatizing the duel with added characters, romantic subplots, and heightened tension. Its version of events took liberties with history, compressing timelines and reshaping personalities to fit cinematic needs, but it also embedded the idea of the duel in global popular culture. In Eastern narratives, the focus often remained on Zaitsev as a representative of Soviet resilience, while Western treatments sometimes framed the story in more individualistic terms, highlighting personal rivalry and inner conflict. Across media, the figure of the sniper shifted between hero, anti-hero, and haunted survivor, reflecting changing attitudes toward war and violence. Through these retellings, public perceptions of snipers, as cold professionals, as reluctant killers, or as tragic figures, were shaped as much by art as by archival record. In the end, the story of Vasily Zaitsev and the Stalingrad sniper war sits at the intersection of myth and memory. The historical record can confirm much: the ferocity of the fighting in Stalingrad, the importance of snipers on both sides, Zaitsev's documented presence and effectiveness, the existence of organized sniper training under his guidance. It can also show the gaps: the uncertain identity of König or Torvald, the lack of definitive German corroboration for a duel exactly as described, the ways in which wartime propaganda and post-war narratives shaped the tale. Yet the persistence of the legend speaks to something deeper. The duel symbolizes the broader struggle for Stalingrad, two adversaries locked in a battle of endurance, using every scrap of cover in a shattered city, each shot carrying enormous weight. Zaitsev emerges from this story as more than a list of confirmed kills. He is a soldier who adapted his childhood skills to a brutal new reality, a storyteller who later tried to make sense of what he had done and seen, and a symbol onto whom a nation projected its hopes and ideals. Whether every detail of the three-day duel unfolded exactly as he described may never be known with certainty. What endures is the image of two snipers, lying in the cold ruins, waiting and watching, their personal contest reflecting the larger war raging around them. A reminder that even in conflicts measured in armies and divisions, the fate of a city can still hinge, for a moment, on the eye, the hand, and the will of a single human being.